19-year-old?
Modernism was
very glad to be in Los Angeles right now as an art maker, as an artist.
So to what extent is the production of the work part of the thinking process?
Yeah, I think it is a huge part of it for me anyway, because I think I go into like various projects with an idea, and I've formulated the idea, and that idea hasn't happened behind a camera. You know, it's happened where I've just been floating around or just sketching or thinking or whatever, and then I get to the all of the planning or whatever, the pre-production of it, you know, and I get into the space with the performers, or I'm performing, or whoever with it, and then slowly the work starts to kind of slide, you know, it starts to shift, and it's because of the just the materiality of it all, you know, the something's not working or something's working more, and actually I think that then I start to kind of think on the move a little bit, and things happen that I wasn't expecting, and really sometimes the result can be very different than those initial ideas, and I think because of certain projects being really within the spirit of experimentation, like say Approach to Mundi Mundi, I have an idea that I want to say, I don't know, demonstrate rather than just illustrate human form balancing, you know, like it's a pretty open brief, and then I know that I want to use a motorcycle, and I know that I want to have it, that single figure riding away, you know, Kelly-esque as per Nolan or whatever, and I know the location, but then, you know, I guess that I try and chase it as close to those ideas, but then just down the road I'm kind of interested in how the lines looked under the wheels, and so I actually just do a whole different work that just looks at these lines dancing on this highway, you know, and it's something that I didn't plan on doing. Like I just didn't have a clue that was going to be as interesting as this thing that I really planned out through this other work. So sometimes entire works will just spring up in the kind of shadow of, or as a kind of addendum to another project. So yeah, I think that idea of like a material play actually being where the real thinking takes place in a project is important to kind of keep in mind, that it doesn't happen in that kind of smooth linear way where you think about it, or for me anyway, it never happens like that. It's always like the elements are always going to pervert the idea somehow.
Your titles, you know, when we were working on the book for your Afghanistan work, your titles tended to change throughout the process between the, well, I suppose within the post-production process. So how important is the title?
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, I always think of like Duchamp saying that it's like the unseen color of a painting, you know, like it's really in there. It's not, calling a work untitled is to kind of maybe sort of defer to some kind of projection to the work itself, but the title is a kind of one of those guide tracks, or it's a framing device that's really important, you know. And also I like the idea that they're poetic, and it's the artist extending themselves in a different medium again, you know. It's like having to use some other language to describe. You're entitled to title, and I think that's interesting. And they're a problem, you know, because you do start to kind of specify like maybe a range of readings through the title. So it's a nightmare, you know. It's really tough. But I love that idea that they can be really quite long as well, or like this kind of reduced haiku like poetic title. So for me, I'm endlessly fascinated by just titling, you know. I think it's great, and I find it really hard. I don't find them easy. That's why they go through this kind of incubation and gestation period. Like you have them on post-it notes, and all of a sudden they look shit, and you have to kind of rewrite them, and then that one looks worse than the first one. So you think maybe the first one it's you know, and you know, and I actually like people who play with them. Like I like that whole Sigma polka kind of thing, like, you know, whatever, that whole aliens told me to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting as a title.
Said,
You know, it's interesting because that if I looked at the painting, I'd think, wow, that's a really kind of, you know, tough kind of work, and then the title just completely inverts the seriousness of the object or whatever. You know, it's a really powerful thing. You can completely invert the logic of the work through this little thing, this little sentence of it. You know, it's amazing. So anyway, yeah, I do, but I guess also they're very important, you know, in terms of locating some of my works. So Storm Sequence was one of these ones that I didn't really have this this kind of strategy in place, but later on with approach to Mundi Mundi, it was very important that I had the Aboriginal place name, the Indigenous place name for that location there in the title. And Mundi Mundi was amazing because I guess in Latin it also means, you know, of the world, and it was strange that you had this kind of this meaning, this kind of this word that kind of showed up in this other language, even though we'd sort of, you know, brought about our own spelling of Mundi, and then it's doubled for emphasis in the Indigenous use. But that was an interesting thing. Also, like other projects, if I knew that there was, like, say, an Indigenous place name where that project was taking place, then that would be included in the title, because I think it was that was of utmost importance to recognize. So if I was to rename some old works like Storm Sequence, I would call it Bondi, because of the fact that that's the sound of water over crashing rocks in an Indigenous kind of understanding of that place is connected to that word Bondi. But I'm screwed. I can't go back, and totally screwed. Very disappointing.
Tell me, does music play any part in your working process?
It has recently, yeah. I think maybe it was at the start, because I used to listen to a lot of music in the studio as a painter, and painters have got these great music collections, you know, because otherwise I think they go insane because they're spending so much time alone in rooms, and then but then when I wasn't so interested in having a studio practice, I wanted to get out there and start directly involving myself in the environment. That I started to lose music. Both in like some, I don't know, it wasn't like some background, it wasn't some soundtracking my life anymore. Even though I did use it in some way, like say in Storm Sequence, I worked with Kazumichi Grime, who was this experimental electronic musician, but it was always a way that would seem like a collaboration, not like the musician was going to come and just soundtrack the work. You know, it was kind of like a secondary thing. He would develop the track as I was developing the work. And so he kind of heard about these ideas that I had, and then he went away and shorted, like, you know, these like audio jacks on his tongue and started picking up all this bioelectrical energy and bioelectrical whatever energy. I guess he tried to translate this idea of a storm into a kind of an electrical storm of the body. That was his mission, and it was great. So you have this kind of crackling, and so that seemed appropriate to put next to the image. But a lot of the time, music is too distracting. I would prefer to just let the image run, and that the image would have supremacy. That you have to project a soundtrack, or you have some ambient sound coming in and crashing in on the experience, but that the sound is something that's completely forgotten. Until recently, I did this project with the Wagner piece. Now all I can hear is the overture to the Flying Dutchman, because I listened to it for about maybe 6 months.
Can some of your very early cuts of the work that you did down at Bondi, which I'm not even sure actually made it to the exhibition that you had in 2000 in Art Space. There was classical music in the background of that. Yeah. I did explore these different options. You know, like I was really interested in, like, say taking like I think the one that you're talking about. I looked at this Gorecki piece, you know. And I was just getting a really small loop out of
sort of this number 5 of, you know, I was just taking looping fractions of, but again, it just didn't seem appropriate. Like, I like those stories of, like, say, you know, Kubrick, like, commissioning an entire soundtrack for 2001 and then just trashing it for classical music. I went the other way. I had all of this great classical music that I was considering, and then I didn't have the rights to it. I didn't like it in the end. It was too epic. It didn't serve the image. So I went and started talking to you know, Kazumichi about this. So it was kind of it was just a different way of dealing with music at that time.
With the I'm thinking of the most overt aviation video you've done, which is I Live at One Infinite Loop.
Yeah.
With where did the title come from?
I was interested in this idea that that Apple computers, Macintosh, was located in this part of California, and the kind of industrial park is called Infinite Loop, and they're number 1 Infinite Loop. It's their kind of location, and I was thinking it's strange that all of these people who are associated with this kind of computer company, we're all kind of, like, say, somehow connected to this one spot where it's not Foxconn where it's being produced in China necessarily, even though they've redressed that problem. They're now trying to manufacture in North America, but it was kind of like you have a series of discussions in boardrooms around product design, whether it's from Jonathan Ives from the UK or whatever, or the locals who were in Apple, that they were really going to have this astounding effect on us. You know, that technology would somehow lay the way for these possibilities in communication, and I was interested in that, even though that doesn't really necessarily have anything to do with the work that I made, except for this idea of a loop. And it being loop. Yeah, and even like the plane at some point can do a configuration of loops that it's almost like you're tracing some like imaginary Mobius strip. So I felt like it was one of those titles where it's not descriptive of the work immediately, but it does have some poetic function in there.
And the infinity symbol appears throughout your work.
Yeah, I'm interested in it. I think it's probably because it's like some way of indexing the unending, apart from maybe a kind of theological one, which is more like sort of eternity or something. You know what I mean? Infinity seems like it's kind of a scientifically sound way of not knowing, rather than and not that I've got any bias either way. It's just that I also was obsessed with this idea of that Mobius strip form, of having this one surface that loops on itself. It was interesting to think of that stuff, and then using it casually, you know, like painting it on the top of skateboards, or looking at how it kind of reads as this kind of 8 that got drunk and fell over on its side or something, whatever. You know, I'm not getting too heavy with the Mobius strip in my work. It's just something that's nice to think of in terms of the sublime, perhaps, because you kind of think of this kind of idea of the unending being very hard to grasp conceptually, and I love that.
And finally, are you still skateboarding?
Yeah, I still skateboard. I think there's a term for like older skateboarders, geezers.
Geezers?
Yeah, we're kind of like the kind of knocking on 40 or post 40, and so yeah, no, I still skateboard. But and actually a few years ago I was very serious about it. Even just maybe 2 years ago, I was still training for competitions and stuff, which was
you're doing quite well as well, aren't you?
I mean, I was in an amateur sense. Yeah, I mean, it was just like I'm not anywhere near that professional status or whatever. But I saw it as like a way of getting back into it for a time. It was great. Like I've always actually been into it, but it was kind of formalized by actually having to go somewhere to skate in a competition. It was weird. I hadn't done that for a very long time. But now I'm more interested in it just being like a really personal thing, more like a kind of health exercise. It's pathetic to say that, but it's just like a kind of, because it is really aerobic, and you need like a lot of reflex and like coordination, so it's good to keep that up. But I'm also in dialogue with skateboarders, including this one guy who I've been obsessed with for years called Rodney Mullen, who kind of invented like a lot of the threshold tricks for skateboarding. They're kind of like he laid the sort of foundations for modern skateboarding. It's great. And so I'm kind of inspired to work with skateboarding as a subject more even than skateboarding myself. It's probably a sign of old age.
I was thinking that when you said it's a form of aerobic exercise.
That's when you're fucked. As soon as you say that, I do it because it's exercise now, not because it's like vicious, radical, punk, transgressive. It's like, it just keeps the weight off. It's like such a kind of pedestrian way of thinking. It's like I don't know if sort of base jumpers will ever see their sport as just keeps the adrenaline levels up. I just need to know that I could die at any point in my life. So I just jump, do a jump every now and then. So yeah, no, it's it's good to keep there though, because I kind of feel like as soon as the skateboarding goes as a practice, it's not active in my life, I don't have the credibility to actually make work about it. And so when I stop skateboarding, I can't really go up to skaters and ask them to do stuff if I can't do it myself.
I've noticed actually in London last week that a lot of skaters in London will have video cameras with them.
Yeah.
A lot of them will actually film what they're doing. Yeah. It's almost like with those kind of communities coming in as a sort of independent filmmaker to try and make a documentary or even record some material, you sort of it's kind of hopeless really, because the community themselves generate so many amazing images, and why wouldn't they? Because they, as cinematographers or videographers or whatever, they're going to know exactly what their peers are going to do. They can preempt it, so it's great that there's this kind of self-representation going on, and it's all to do with the accessibility of the technology now. Like GoPro cameras and things like that.
Yeah, no one has to. Yeah, and it's great that the cameras are so small and discreet that they don't even throw you off balance. It's not even an issue to have a camera on you, and that goes across a lot of different sports. And so the athletes themselves are representing themselves better than anyone. I think that's really interesting.
I actually saw a guy walking down the strip in Las Vegas with a cap on with a GoPro camera. Yeah. Recording it all.
Well, it can be extreme if you've just lost at a casino and you have to exit quickly out of that could get pretty hairy. So I mean, I guess there's the other thing is that you have the potential to record so much that. Like who is watching in a sense. It's the community themselves that end up watching so much of their own material because it's kind of recorded in this particular way. And maybe, the BBC can still come in and do some sort of survey of whatever, and it'll be very cinematic and high-end. But the production value that's happening with the crew on the street is so high through GoPro. So this is like a kind of revolution that's taking place. It's amazing to see that. Really, really quite wild. And so I feel like I do need to do it. I need to be a part of it if I'm ever going to be justifying recording those kind of activities. But I was also thinking that it's the same with warfare, that you have like soldiers who are now recording themselves, and the idea of making a film about war has now kind of been superseded by the soldiers themselves recording that experience. And we see it through films like Restrepo and this other film that was made by these Scandinavians, Anaconda, I think. It's extraordinary that that helmet cams give you an experience as a viewer that's so much more compelling than, say, restaging as a drama, or even recording from this camera position that's somehow removed. It's just the idea that you're embodying the experience, that the viewpoint is fused to the subject, and then the viewer then can just transport themselves into that experience of the performer or whatever. It's great.
And conflating with the sort of the visuality of a first-person shooter game as well. Yeah, of course. Yeah. We're almost kind of in a way trained to look at these images before they were possible at this definition through gaming. You would have this kind of avatar that you could control in that space. Now it's I think it's changed kind of
visual culture forever. I don't think we can kind of go back from this expectation that once you see that GoPro camera on a winged suit in free fall, that it's CGI. We just go, oh, this must be the performer. So it's interesting that it's not even questioned anymore. I just assume that it is actual footage, just through the aesthetic. And then also you get people who are now theorizing, like Hito and that gang. You know, she's sort of talking about the power of the poor image, that poor images that are in lower resolution automatically sing out this their credibility as to like whatever reportage or citizen reporters out there. You know, it's like the poor image has a kind of power that the high definition Hollywood image can only ever achieve if they degrade that definition down to this kind of this poor image. So it's kind of an amazing field at the moment with video, that even the kind of materiality of video before you even start shooting will line you up for a whole series of readings. It's amazing. It's great. It's very exciting.
Well, thank you very much, Shaun. It's been a real pleasure catching up, and I think this is probably about the third or fourth attempt to be in the same city at the same time.
Yeah, we've made it. We've done it.
Fantastic city to be in.
Yeah. No, it's happened, and we can even hear the boats like cruising by in the background on that canal. So it's not CGI. It's actually, this is not a backdrop. This is for real.
We didn't get a gondolier going past singing, you know.
Yeah.
Operatic
Yeah.
unfortunately.
We've always got a chance to restage this interview at some point. Yeah, that'd be great. Because I've never done that, actually. I've never been on a gondola because it's just been such a goddamn cliche that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah. But anyway, I think it's you know, it's pretty exciting just to be in this space, because I was just thinking, you know, where else in the world are you going to be able to like traverse like an urban space with this kind of population density and not come across cars? Like, where in the world? Like, the automobile is like some malignant kind of cancer. I was thinking in India, perhaps, you know, you have like cities like Varanasi, where on the banks of the Ganges, the density of the buildings were never really placed to allow for cars. And so many other medieval cities in this country as well, you know, like whatever, you've got like San Gimignano and all these places that the thoroughfares just cannot get an automobile. So it's great. It's like the rise of the moped and stuff, because that's the only thing that can kind of work other than donkeys or horses or whatever. So I kind of always think that I'm getting this experience here that's so unique just because of that one thing. That I do that. I exhibit this car here, and then people were sort of,
yeah, that would have been like probably the only car on the island.
Yeah, unfortunately Richard Prince had a car in front of the Dogana, and it was a great car. Yeah, damn him. But the weird thing was, people were going, so what about the security? And we're like, who cares? Like, you don't have to lock it up. Where's it going to go? Do you know what I mean? It's like the one place where you can.
Did they get it?
Yeah, through the canal. But it was just great to think there's nowhere for this thing to go. Literally, like, it's stuck in this on this island where, unless someone was going to come with a barge and a crane, you just let it. You know, it was just amazing. There's something kind of beautiful about that. That Venice, Italy, is really safe for cars. Great place to park. You know.
Well, thanks very much for meeting me today, Shaun, and discussing your work, and best of luck in the future with dealing with the sea.
Nice one. Yeah, I'll see you there.